Hello everyone. This is the last talk of the day, right? So we're all gagging for cake and raffle and whatnot, but shouldn't be too long. Quick warning before we get going. I flew in from Colombia at midnight, landed at 5 a.m. and I currently feel like I'm underwater, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But if I mumble or I seem like I'm very tired, it's because I am. Quick thing about me in a relevant sense, because no one cares about people banging on about themselves too much. I've been writing PHP for about 15 years. I'm 26, so I started at 11. It's quite young. I've been involved in the rise and fall of a lot of frameworks. So we all know that Cake was the first on the block. It was the first and the best, of course. And there's been a lot of frameworks that have come and gone since then. So things like CodeIgniter, boo, that had the express goal of like not being PEAR. And there are a lot of other frameworks that tried to avoid PEAR, and because of that, PEAR kind of died, mostly because it was kind of awful in the first place. So in the end, things like CodeIgniter and Fuel and Cake and Zend and everyone under the sun, Laravel, they all ended up making their own bundles, and I've ended up making the same CodeIgniter OAuth bundle in Fuel PHP OAuth bundle, and then that was ported to the Laravel OAuth bundle, and it's all just a mess. So I saw a lot of that stuff happening. I got involved with the framework interoperability group, which CakePHP is a part of. You recently introduced PSR2, which I know you were all super excited about. And I feel like that Fig group has made a lot of these changes that I'm going to talk about now much easier to implement. Before, they just weren't a possibility. So one of the bazillion groups that I'm part of, or was part of until I rage quit the internet the other day, is the League of Extraordinary Packages. Now, the idea behind the League of Extraordinary Packages was I kind of quit CodeIgniter and Fuel and a few other things, and I didn't really have a place to put my code. I didn't have a vendor name to put it under. And because Composer was now a thing, everyone was putting their code under vendor names. And a lot of people were using their really complicated Polish surnames, which made it hard to remember what they were called. But I kind of wanted to have a place to put my code. And I wondered if my friends had the same problem. So I chatted to a few of my friends, Alex Bilby, Frank DeJonge, Ben Corlett, Kayla Daniels, and a few other people. And we all decided that it would be awesome to have a place to put our code together. So my initial idea was the PHP Super Best Friends Club, which was an awesome name, and I really, really wish we stuck with that, but we had a really hard time coming up with like a decent vendor name for that. It was like PHP SBFC or something, and it kind of sucked. So we ended up having another go. Someone suggested the League of Extraordinary Packages. I thought that would be really cool. I thought that people might freak out about us using the word package, because it sounds like we're making a dick joke, but in the end, people just got really mad because they thought we were extraordinary and they thought we were full of ourselves, forgetting the fact that that name is based on a stupid Sean Connery movie. So we've had a lot of shtick from the get-go. People considered us to be elitist because we originally didn't let other people in. So then we started letting other people in, and they complained that we were trying to take over all of the code on the internet and put it under the PHP League brand to boost my own ego. So regardless of what we do, people give us crap. But really, it's like Aura. It's just like a component vendor where we release code, and it's framework agnostic, and we like it. We tried to make it not about us, who the members were, because it's not important, it's about the code. And then, of course, people complained that was us removing people's personalities from the projects, and it's kind of going around in circles. But we have a lot of packages. Hands up if you've used a PHP League package. Thanks for putting your hand up, Brian. He's on the list. So we have one of CakePHP's own in the inner sanctum that is the PHP League. And you're not meant to be able to read that. It's just there to illustrate the fact that we have got an absolute bunch of code. All of these things either aren't done currently in PHP or were so bad we had to do it again properly. There's a lot of really fun stuff you can find. Now, part of the League of Extraordinary Packages was we wanted our code to be extraordinary. That doesn't mean we're full of ourselves and we think we can write the best code in the world, but it means that in PHP 2 or 3 years ago when we started, a lot of code was crap on PHP classes, stuff you found on SourceForge, something you downloaded or copied and pasted from somebody's blog and then pasted into your website and hoped you noticed their tweet about an update, right? It was a complete mess before Composer came along. So we have a few metrics that we use to try and aim to be extraordinary. Even if we can't reach being extraordinary, it's still the goal we strive for. And those goals are defined as these things, which again, you probably can't read, but we'll get onto in the next slides. So this is pretty much, it's not about the league, because you don't want to hear me bang on about that. It's how to successfully release an open source PHP package and hopefully learn some stuff and maybe become a slightly better developer in the process of focusing on these things that you might not have thought about. It splits into 3 sections: the making, marketing, and maintaining of the package. So there's some things to consider before you start. There's a few warnings and a few good things. The first is, obviously, does it exist already? It's better to support an existing package than to make your own, because they've probably done a bunch of really boring work that you don't need to do, right? If there's a package, I always use the example of routers, if you're American, which clearly I'm not. Routers in PHP are ridiculous. Everyone's decided to make a router over the last couple of years, and I looked on Packagist, and there's about 20,000. 20,000 for saying, yo, this get command with this URL should go there. How many different ways can you do that? And most of this stuff is just like, I didn't like the fact that you had to do get as a string, so I made get a method instead. Nah, change the world, no one cares. So have a look at existing stuff. Do that by looking on Google, Packagist, and GitHub. Try a few keywords, because if you search for routing, router, and like HTTP route, it actually becomes more than 20,000. It's more like 30 or 40,000. So try a few variations on keywords. See if there's one that you like. If one package does 90% of what you want, but not the other 10%, you can probably jump in there with a few PRs instead of starting everything from scratch, because as I'm going to show you, some of it can be awful. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever try and do it yourself. Things like fast route. Anyone come across that one? Nikita Popov, one person. You should all have a look at it. It's really fun. It's not fun, it's really nerdy, but it's quick. Nikita's fast route was a brand new way of routing, which has not been done before, and it is drastically faster than the other approaches. Trouble is, it had a crap API. So the League router, which used to be Orno route, and we adopted it, it basically wraps the complicated API and makes it pretty. So you get all the benefits of these fancier routers with the absolute speed of Nikita's fast route library. So just because something's been done doesn't mean you can't do it better, but it probably has been done pretty damn well already. So try and have a look. You might have a unique way of solving the same problem. As I said, like Nikita's fast route was routing again, but in a unique way. So don't be scared of trying to do something again just because it's been done a lot in the past. Maybe you can do it, maybe you don't need to. One really important factor is, do you have the time? That's part of the reason why I've given up most of my responsibilities, because I have an actual job now, and maintaining code that you're not necessarily looking after is a lot of hard work. Writing the documentation can be like 10 hours, 2 days worth of work in itself. So just writing docs for this cool new thing that you made in one hack project in the evening is a lot of work. And what a lot of people do, whilst trying to avoid the wrath of idiots on Reddit isn't necessarily something to try and live your life by. If you post something on Reddit that your first git commit push was like an hour ago, people are going to rip you apart. Don't make something in 20 minutes and go, it's ready, because it's not. You want to wait a little bit longer than that. So it's not all cautionary tales. Some of the cool stuff is that you meet a bunch of people. Some of the League I met through their work, and I'm really happy that I met them. Other ones I knew before that, and that's why I got them involved with the League. But beyond the League, some of the people I've met through open source projects, or through my open source work and their contributions to my stuff, I've become best friends with them. Some of them stay on my sofa far too much. We've referred each other for jobs, and that's all been done through open source work. And you even get to speak at conferences sometimes, so that can be another benefit to releasing stuff. The other thing is you learn a lot. You start off just thinking you're releasing a PHP package, but then you get all this stuff as well. You've got learning about changelogs and the fig and TDD and SemVer and unit testing and dependency injection and GitHub and all this stuff. There's so much stuff that you learn. So let's have a look at the stuff we're making. As I said, people post on Reddit a lot and it just gets ripped apart. So that's not... People on Reddit don't have a filter. So you do actually get good feedback. It's just hidden behind layers of really, really pent-up aggression for no apparent reason. But it can be not a great way of getting feedback, but you'll definitely get some feedback. Like I said, people push a few hours after they made it. I know you're excited. Maybe calm down. Maybe sit on it for a weekend. Maybe ask some friends via DMs to have a look at it first. But PHP's come a really long way in the last few years, and we don't accept PHP classes bollocks anymore. Like that level of code just isn't a thing that you can do. So you've got to make it good. The one thing to do is make sure you don't get ignored just because you kind of skipped a few steps, and these are some of the things that we should talk about. So you can have the most powerful PHP package in the world. If your API sucks, no one will use it. They don't care how powerful it is. This is one of the reasons why things like Symfony and Zend are awesome, but a lot of people would go with Coding Lighter, which was comparatively terrible. It ignored every single design pattern for programming. It ignored everything in the world. It used PHP 4 style code, but it was still incredibly popular because it had an API so easy that any idiot could use it, right? And that's the kind of same thing with packages. So if your package is really hard, it's a really complicated API, you have to instantiate 1,000 lines of boilerplate instead of just calling one static function, people are going to go with the static approach. So all of your classes, methods, and functions need to be thought about. This is an example of a pretty gross API for a very powerful package. Swift is awesome. Who's used Swift? Right, and it sends emails and it works, right? But it's really complicated. You have to instantiate a new instance of the SMTP transport layer, and then you have to send a message by creating an instance and setting these things on different lines and send it some arrays, and then create a mailer instance and send a message and all this shit. Whereas the Laravel one is that. It does the exact same thing, but it's just so much more readable and human. So try and aim for concise APIs when possible. Naming things right. Now, y'all really guilty at this. I'm American now, so I say y'all. But if I say that back in Bristol, I'll get punched. You really want to try and avoid using... There are certain terms that everyone puts in their API, like handler, mailer, manager, utility, whatever, and they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. Another thing that people do is they try and come up with really fun themes for their names. Bakery, anyone? All this stuff. Laravel does the same thing. Fuel PHP, we did the same thing. There was the oil command line utility for the fuel class, and the packages were called cells and kill me. It was like the task manager was the refinery. Like, oh, we're so clever. We came up with words that sound like a thing. Just don't do it, because when people look at that haven't been using Cake for 5 years or whatever, they don't know what you're talking about, and it just comes across as just trying to be clever. One example would be this. Whoops. Anyone know what Whoops is? It was a pretty cool package. Used to be called Damn It or something, and they changed the name because Reddit shouted at them. Whoops run, and you put that in the Whoops variable, and then you push some handlers in there, and you register that handler. I don't really know what on earth that is talking about. So maybe renaming run to error handler would be a good start. So that example below might be better. But then even better would be, in your examples, these are, because a variable doesn't matter, but in the example that you put on your documentation, error handler is an instance of whoops error handler. Already we're off to a flying start. I now know that I'm dealing with an instance of an error handler instead of dealing with an instance of, right? Then you push another handler on top. You know it's an error handler because it's going into the error handler class, and you're on your way to having a logical discussion with the package. You want to have a clear focus as well. I've seen a lot of people trying to bite off way more than they can chew. They come up with this idea for a package, and then they come up with loads more ideas, and it grows and grows and grows, and you have this monolith package that does a bazillion different things. And even at the package level, even at the class level, people build stuff. They build way too much in there. Maybe back in the older days, early PHP 5 days, the average coding library would be one class. Regardless of how much it did, it would be one class. It'd be loads of private stuff and then a few methods, and that would be it. Purely because people didn't want to add the overhead of including other classes. Well, guess what? Now we've got PHP 5.6, we've got Zend Optimizer built straight into the system. You're not adding that much overhead. If you split your files up into multiple files, they get included once, and then they're included forever until you deploy and change the signature. So having cleaner code and spreading it around is completely okay. When you get to the point, if your package is starting to do two things and it doesn't make sense for both of those things to be in the same package, you can either split that off into a second package and require it with Composer, or you can just go out there and see if someone else is doing that same thing. So a lot of the League packages will rely on other things if there's something out there it could do. You don't have to do it all yourself. Oh, and the other important thing is to try and build your packages so they're extensible. One great example of that is the League Common Mark package. Common Mark is Markdown, but not erratic. So Common Mark is what you should all be using if you're using Markdown, unless you hate your customers. With the Common Mark package, you can add extension, you can add extra parsers on top, so that you can add GitHub flavored Markdown and tables and Smarty Pants and all this other stuff. You can just hook that in. So people don't have to go and copy your Common Mark package and fork it and give it a silly name and add some other features. They can just push that in and release it as a package that requires your package, right? Utilizing common design patterns is a good way to go. As I mentioned, CodeIgniter used to flagrantly ignore all design patterns. It had interfaces without actually using interfaces. They just looked roughly the same. There were a lot of problems. And all you need to do is use things like dependency injection and factories. And if you want to avoid the wrath of Reddit, don't ever put any static code anywhere near your examples. Don't put them in the quick start, at least. Bury them somewhere further down. So I mentioned already, breaking apart large classes is just a good way to go. It makes things easier to maintain. I forgot what I put for this slide. Generally, there are a lot of other talks that talk about how to make good OOP, and I'm not going to try and get on that too much. But if your method is doing more than 10 lines of code, then it should be another method. You should keep things small and concise and easily testable, and then you have much less pain in the future. Your code should also be framework agnostic. Now, I know you all love CakePHP because every one of you is wearing a Cake t-shirt, but how many of you work with other frameworks? This is a safe space. You can put your hands up. Okay, a fair few. I was lying. You're going to be met in the parking lot. How many of you work occasionally with vanilla PHP that you just kind of slapped a router and a container together? Right, there's a fair few people. So if you make your code CakePHP only, then you hate all the people that just put their hand up. Right, they can't use your code, and that's annoying and it's unnecessary. If you find yourself requiring a framework purely because it has some utility library, like a lot of people used to include the Laravel support package just because it had some array pluck methods, you can copy that method. It's okay. Just copy the method and then put, thanks, Taylor, that's really nice. This is a bit of code, I like it. And then you're fine. And if you are building in support for frameworks optionally, a great way to do that is with a bridge package. So you can build so there's Fly System. It's a package called Fly System, and then someone built CakePHP Fly System, which is just integration glue, so you get nice config management and stuff like that. But if you're not doing a bridge package and you're building in the optional support into your package, don't require the framework in Composer unless you put it into required dev. Then when you run your unit tests, you test that it works with the framework, but you're not forcing people that don't use CakePHP to randomly have CakePHP just because you might use it or not. Does that make sense? Picking versions of PHP is really hard. People fight about this all the time. The reason it can be hard is that a lot of content management systems lag behind, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity. Poor WordPress. I know they get a lot of slack, but they are working really hard to get off PHP 5.2. They're actually, interestingly, not a lot of people know this, but Automatic, the company, are monitoring the sites and the install versions of sites running WordPress and the hosting companies they're with. They're then contacting the hosting companies and letting them know if they could just upgrade the version without breaking anything based on the version of the add-ons, and doing all sorts of stuff like that. And then if it is going to break it, they tell the user how to do that themselves. So a lot of CMSs are stuck in the past. They don't want to be, trust me. But if you make packages that are really, really, really high, then a lot of large systems won't get to use them. Things like Laravel, I think, is still 5.4, even though 5.6 is cool now, right? So it's worth aiming lower. We at the League have just, every new major version we're releasing now is, every major version we released over the last few months is bumped up to 5.4. Sod 5.3, we're done here. It's over. You can use short array syntax now, it's fine. But you have to weigh up the pros and cons of, am I just upgrading to this new version because it's cool and I think we should, or are you doing it because if you stay on this older version, then your code's going to be 20% slower because of some crap workaround you've had to do instead of using generators, right? You have to really weigh up the pros and cons there. Source code on GitHub. Anyone use Bitbucket? Stop it. Anyone use Google Code? It's being deleted, so stop that. Anyone use SourceForge? Yeah. I remember when SourceForge was cool. I do actually laugh. I think about in the future how there's going to be someone, like some jackass like me, standing on the stage being like, who still uses GitHub, am I right? But for now, GitHub is clearly the winner in every way. Coding Later got put on Bitbucket and we got exactly 0 pull requests. And then they eventually took my advice and put it on GitHub and we had like 400 in the first week. Just use GitHub. Everyone's got an account. Write tests. Everyone's writing tests for all their applications all the time here, right? Everyone? No one. Who writes tests now and then? No. When people look through, when you post for review of your Composer code, the first thing they look for, they hit the Readme, and they look for a little badge that says, did my test pass? And if you haven't got that badge, they think, oh, maybe they don't know what badge is. Let's have a look for the test file. It's not there. What's going on? And the second you don't have tests, no one will use your code. People will just skip straight past that and use one that's 2 times slower and a whole bunch grosser and with a stupid name just so they can have one that's tested. Because these days, without tests, no one believes your code actually works. So why would they trust you? The benefit of doing tests, I did this with Fractal actually. Fractal's it's hard to explain what it is. It like helps you output data and stuff. I did a major refactor a couple of times, and because I had like 95% test coverage, I could just blindly break everything, and I knew that my test still passed, my code still worked. It was awesome. Whereas if I didn't have that, I would have had to set up these really complex environments where I'm clicking around in the browser and messing about for 4 hours just trying to make it work. So just use tests. And then put it on Composer. Has anyone released a PHP package here and not put it on Composer? Mark's hand went quickly down. Of course you would. There's no reason to not. I won't ever use a package that's not on Composer. I don't want to have to subscribe to that person's RSS feed and hope that they release a blog post about security patches. That sounds terrible. If I could just run Composer update and get a new version, then obviously I want that. Composer JSON is really easy. Everyone knows how this stuff works. You get a little name, a description. Please use a description. People don't know what your code does unless you say. And I found so many packages that were like, it does stuff, and didn't actually put a description in. Put a link to the homepage where your docs are, and put in the license so people know if they can use it or not. Even if you use a stupid license, like my Don't Be a Dick license, like just put something in there, just anything. Probably MIT is pretty cool. And then put your name in so that people can spam you with really badly targeted questions for support at 2 in the morning. Then put it on Packagist. You've got it on Composer. Well, it's not on Composer until it's on Packagist. You've made the composer.json, but until you submit it, it's not anywhere. So Packagist is the main thing. A lot of other people have been talking about having their own framework-specific repository of things, but that just seems kind of stupid because you're making people look in 2 places. Just put stuff on Packagist. And then just tag stuff. Once you've got your GitHub hook set up with Packagist, you just tag stuff and then people get new releases. It's the easiest system in the world. Who knows about Git attributes? Yeah. Using this, you can single-handedly save the polar bears from not having any ice to stand on. You can use GitHub export ignore to trim down the file of your archive files. So if anyone installs your code via Composer, unless they have the prefer source code version enabled, they're going to get it via a zip. That zip comes from GitHub, therefore it comes from Git, so it will look at this file and say, all right, don't put that in the archive. Which means the people downloading the zip file don't get all your random tests, all these weird image files that you might have in there. Anything is just completely ignored, and that saves bandwidth and therefore polar bears or something. Who uses semantic versioning? Who's actually releasing packages? Is this relevant to anyone? Because there's like 4 people with their hands up. Semantic versioning is awesome. Do people know what it is if they don't use it? Cool, let me tell you. Semantic versioning, it's all about having 3 version numbers, 1.2.3. The first one is major, the second one is minor, the third one is patch. I saw someone tweeting about it today. It should be renamed essentially or considered as breaking, new features, bug fixes. So if I go from version 2 to version 3, then guess what? Stuff's going to break. You should not blindly upgrade and push it to production because then you don't have an app anymore. minor, so new features, you can add new stuff in there as long as it doesn't break old stuff. So new methods, new attributes, new whatever, as long as they're optional, things should still work. And then bug fixes are like security fixes or anything else. It can be really challenging to make that stuff work, and it can be really hard to stick to, I can't release this feature for 2 months because it would break everything, and it's hard, but it's important. Coding standards. Everyone here loves coding standards. We all agree that spaces are the one true way of formatting your code, right? Yeah! You have been brainwashed, sir. That's what happens when you join the league. So, I don't care what your personal preference is. My personal preference also used to be tabs. CodeIgniter and Cake used to have very similar standards, and I grew up the CodeIgniter way. And I span on a dime in the space of about a week once I was presented with PSR2. I changed the settings in my IDE, it worked, and then it was never an issue again. Now I kind of like it. So I know that getting PSR2 into Cake, I think a few people died. You have a smaller team now, right? There were some troubles, but it's in, and guess what? We're all still breathing, apart from those poor souls. It's really not about you. It's just about the people that work with your code. They don't want to have to, change their IDE and mess around with stuff. And there's a flash flood warning in this area until 8:30. Avoid flood areas. Check local media. So, yeah, good. As long as it's only a meter. But my drink. So yeah. Use PSR2, it's just easier. Use Code Sniffer. Put that in your editor. Whatever you use. What's it called? PHP Storm has Code Sniffer built in, and PSR2 now I think is default. So your editor just shouts at you if you do it wrong. Seriously? We will better get the hell out of here. Is the Patriot uphill or downhill from where we are, Jose? Level? Alright, fine. We'll find a rooftop bar, don't worry about it. I'm just going to skip the rest of this slide because I was blathering about floods. So, dot blocks, I don't care. Continuous integration. Really, I can't even say it. Continuous integration is just so easy. It's the freest win. At work, I found out that our iPhone app wasn't running through Travis because some tests were breaking, and then we pushed a thing and it broke. Why would you... Why? Continuous integration basically means that just because you decided to push a change on a Friday and you forgot to run the tests, you don't break everyone's application that uses your stuff. If you don't use continuous integration, you're being an ass. With Travis, it's so easy. You just put .travis.yml, you put Code Sniffer, and you put PHP unit, and it just does it. It just does it. And you can list out PHP 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 7, and it will test all of them. You can even get really specific with the version, so you can say, make sure it runs on 5.4.0 and 5.4, and that'll be the latest. So you get a whole range of tests, right? Scrutinizer CI is a pretty cool thing. I think you have to pay to make it run tests, but you can get Travis to pump the test results into Scrutinizer, and then you get feedback on how good and messed up your code is, how much mess detection there is, how much cyclomatic complexity there are. Try saying that 10 times with a mouthful of peas. And Circle CI is another cool option, which is like Travis, but 100 times faster. Only it doesn't work with pull requests, so that sucks. Have a license, like I said, just whack one in there, pick anything you want. And contributor instructions. We found, regardless of how many instructions you give to contributors, they'll ignore that and send crap your way anyway, but it catches a few. You can put a contributing.md into the root of your GitHub project, and it will, when someone tries to send a pull request or an issue, it will say, have you read these contributing instructions? And in there you can put, we use PSR2, we expect you to rebase all of your commits into a single commit before you send a pull request, or when you send the pull request. Various things like that. However you want your stuff to work, put it in one of those, and then it's done. All of these bits of advice were kind of taken out of the PHP League's website, and they were turned into PHP Package Checklist.com, I think it is, by the same wonderful chap that designed my slides for me. And when I say for me, I mean I stole them from him. PHP Package Checklist is this cool website where you can go to it and it will say most of the same things I've said, but you tick them as you do them, and it will give you links for more information on how to do them. So then you can say, I've done all of these things, and you have a better package. So quickly, marketing. You want to pick an awesome name, something memorable and not too flashy. Marketing's pretty important, to be honest. You can make the best code in the world, but if you don't tell anyone about it, then no one knows. Like, not that many people use Aura, even though it's amazing, just because Paul doesn't know how to market things. So, choosing a name, good start. Something short and sweet, make sure that it's not already taken. Things like Facebook just blatantly ignored the fact that React PHP was a thing, and now React.js is a thing, but I'm sure they wouldn't care either way. Oh, don't use your personal name as well. Like, Sturgeon is a bit of a complex name. Apparently Americans just can't deal with that. But when you get to more complicated things, sorry, Anna, but some Russian names are pretty complicated. When it gets to... If people can't remember it, then they're not going to use it. Or they won't be able to find it in the first place. So pick something simple. Actually, Ben Ramsey, legend of a guy, released a UUID package. Great package. His name's Ben Ramsey, and he decided to go with Rumsa as the vendor name, and no one can remember how to spell that. So just another example of aim for something simple. Documentation makes or breaks a package. If you don't have any docs, no one's going to use your stuff. You want to try and write the docs before you do it. That can be a really good way of working out how you want it all to fit together. Before you start writing a class, you have to work out how this class is going to work with this class, how the whole thing's going to fit. And it's a very basic way of doing TDD. You write the documentation with some quick examples of the code, then you can take those bits of code and base them as your new as your very first test. So you do documentation, then tests, then you can write the code. I really don't agree with read the code being a thing. The Kohana framework used to be super popular for shut up and read the docs, and that's why they weren't a world power. It's really hard to work out what methods are available, especially these days as abstraction is much higher than it used to be. In the Code-Igniter world, every single library would be one class. What's this method? Oh, it's there. It's the method called fill in the foo class, right? But now there's more and more layers of abstraction. It can be really hard to read the code and have an understanding of what's actually going on. So don't tell people to read the code. That's just lazy. Write some docs. The next thing people try and do, I love these slides. Like, we've got a unicorn, and then we've got Loch Ness Monster, and then we've got, I think that's either a man on fire, but it's probably meant to be a Bigfoot, but I don't know. Also, fun fact, the Loch Ness Monster was theoried to be a very large sturgeon, so there you go. Auto-generated docs are as useless as, almost as useless as telling them to read the code. Right? When you have these automated docs, instead of you looking at the code and realizing there's a class called foo which has a bar method and it takes 3 parameters, you have a nice HTML page saying there's a foo class with a bar method that takes 3 methods. It's not that much more useful. It's good to have, so people don't have to download the code and then look at it. They can look at your browser, but it's essentially the same thing. So you want to try and have auto-generated docs and a manual section. Some people call this docs.foo.com/API, and then they have another /manuals, for example, and you can link to the two between each other. The manual section is a human-written explanation of how these things tie together. Here's how you can use this class with this other package, or whatever. The next myth is that you only need a README file. People make an API documentation and then have a README file, and they start putting examples in and have more and more examples as they go, but then you end up just with this really big file, and it takes forever to scroll through anything, and it can be hard to link to stuff. So it's a good place to start, and maybe while you're working through the development versions, not 1, not 2, not 3, you can put stuff in there and then use that as a basis for actual documentation later, but it's really not good enough for an actual package. And then I wrote just an essay about that slide for some reason. The 4th myth is that documentation is easy. It's really, really not. It takes forever to do. I spent months working on the documentation for Fractal over the last little while, and I had some pissy little kid just go, the documentation doesn't show me how to do this obscure thing that you never thought it was ever going to be used to do. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. People expect it to have everything in the world, and it won't, but it's, you know. It can be really hard to explain kind of all the functionality to someone who's not familiar with the with the package. Again, things like Fractal, you can use it to output data for a REST API or something. Like, people don't know what that means. So just me chunking off the serializers and the transformers and the adapters and the whatever, that's not really enough. It doesn't give a good enough overview. So you have to really kind of break it down in a very clear way. Great way of doing that is starting off with what the package is, as basic terms as possible. So with the fly system package, for example, this is a package that will allow you to abstract different file systems using one API. So that's a good start. It's still a little bit confusing. Then you can go on to explain why the package matters, and it says something along the lines of working with different file systems on S3 and Dropbox and Fly system and Rackspace cloud files can be really confusing. They have different SDKs and they have different ways of doing the same thing. So use Fly system to give it one single interface. All right, cool. I'm pretty much there with you at that point. You want to do a short intro, a longer intro, and if you haven't already explained it like I'm 5, make sure you really hammer the point home afterwards and explain what it is. When people try and apply to get their package into the league, we have these packages that are like, this is a handler management system for event buses, and I don't know what that means. I really haven't got a clue. Oh, and other people are like, this is just a port of this other thing in Ruby. And that's not helpful because I don't want to have to go and look at the Ruby thing to find out what this thing is doing. Make a simple example. Can't use words. Nearly bedtime. Make a simple example and show them in the Readme. I know I said don't put all your documentation in the Readme, but put a quick example so you can see exactly how it works. Some people, people that are not English speaking as a first language, might not understand even your explain it like I'm 5 intro. So a little bit of code can go a long way. Not everyone speaks English, or very well. Installation instructions are important. There's a lot of people that don't use Composer. Any of them here? Anyone too afraid to put your hand up for stuff? Who doesn't like being tricked into surveys? Too tired to get my crap jokes out. So installation instructions are really important. A lot of people don't know that you can install things with Composer, even if they know that you can. They're not quite sure how every time. So just put Composer require vendor/package, and then they know that. Maybe put another bit of code in there that says this is how you clone it with Git. That's probably better at home in the contributing markdown, because the only reason to install a package with Git is to contribute towards it. But either way, show them how it works. And also, you want to specify if you need things like a PECL package. So if you are doing something with Markdown, maybe you're using the Sunburn parser as an optional requirement. So list that in your install instructions. This is all you need to install stuff. You can't see, but there's a slash in between there. Composer require league/fractal. This is quite new. And what this does is instead of you having to mess about with your Composer JSON and then like manually add a line in and then run Composer update and blast away your dependencies and have new stuff and it break your app, or do Composer update on the single package, you can just run that and it will put it into your Composer JSON and then download it for you. Right? Everyone know about this? Okay. I did this talk a month ago and everyone was like, whoa, that's amazing. Keep a changelog. Anyone seen keepachangelog.com, I think? It's a really cool standard way of doing changelogs made by some of the GitHub folk. And I've been using it for ages. It's perfect. You basically make a changelog that is done by a human. Please, for the love of the flying spaghetti monster, do not try and make Git commit based changelogs. If I want to look at the Git commits, I'll go and look at the Git commits. Right? I don't need to have you dump that into a file. They don't make sense. They're useless. Half of them are merged, other change. And then even if you exclude those, it's like, change this thing that you didn't even know was a thing, and it's completely irrelevant. Make change logs which show you features that have been added, features that things that have been fixed, things that don't work anymore, and things that might be different, but they should only affect the outside world. Maybe you can put in there, it's now 5% faster if you want to brag, but I don't expect that many people care. So keepachangelog.com is where you find that stuff. Link to yourself. It's not just showing the self-promotion, although that too. You want people to be able to find the code so they can change stuff from your documentation. They have to be able to find the code so they can post issues. If you have a website, put that little ribbon up there or something. And you want them to be able to talk to you, because if they can't find where you are, they're just going to complain about you blindly, and then you have to find that, and then you have to try and stay in a good mood. Whereas if they know how to contact you, they're less likely to be an ass. Less. The other important thing to add is that your README should always have a security contact section. Make it a H2 header. In case you find a security bug, please do not post an issue. Please contact me at my email address. And there you go. Otherwise, people will just post an issue being like, I found this thing, which means everyone can hack your website. And then your website gets hacked, and it's not great. Badges are cool. Don't go mad. You can. People are like, oh, candy. But have a few. These are the ones we use on the League, and it's already a bit too much. We've got code quality, license, all these things go in the Readme. They also go in the docs right here. So we've got a few. It looks a little bit more respectable there. And this documentation in general is a pretty standard format. So this is the League docs, and this is for plates, I believe. This, you might notice a few similarities between these slides here. We've got Vagrant, we've got Stripe, we've got Bourbon, Less, Laravel, I don't know what that is. Read the docs, Ember, all these things, they look the same, right? Got some simple sections on the left-hand side, some code examples in the middle there, and some other nav up top. Everyone does it. Right, last little bit, real quick, so I've gone over. Marketing people is really hard, and people will scream at you, especially these folks, Reddit. But when I released Pyro CMS, which you probably don't know about, it was a code igniter CMS. When I released it, everyone was horrible. It was awful. It looked ugly. It didn't do that much. There were security issues, and people were really mean. So I cried in the shower for about a week, and then I fixed it all, and then people really liked it. So it can be really hard, and you have to have a thick skin. Maybe go and like rant about it over a pint, but then get the feedback, thank them for calling you names, and politely say, I fixed the thing you were concerned about, and then you're already on the way to having much better code. SitePoint is a good place to blog about. They accept blogs from anyone that writes well. PHP Weekly is a good place to submit your blog. PHP Developer, again, you can get in contact with Enigma, and he will probably post about these things if you write blogs about them once they're ready. Maintaining, real quick, keep an eye on it, keep an eye on who's using it, and watch it spread. Great way to do that is to search for it on GitHub, and you can see people using your code. People don't think about this, but if you look at how people are using your code, then you can find out who's bending over backwards to do really complicated things, and then it's kind of like a feature suggestion, right? They're doing some complicated, crazy thing. You're like, oh, I could totally make that easier. That's a great idea. I never thought of that. Let me add this new feature, and then contact them and tell them to upgrade, right? It's just being nice. Have a look on GitHub, see where things are coming from. I had a few people posting about the League packages, various packages, being like, oh, it's amazing, it does this and it does that, but it doesn't do this other thing. And they were kind of crapping on it for not doing that thing. Then I got in touch and said, actually, it does do that thing. We just didn't document it very well. So that gave me the opportunity to update the documentation, and they changed their review to be like, actually, no, it's completely awesome, not just mostly awesome. So Google Analytics do help. Twitter, just block that in your host file. Issues and poor. I actually blocked it off of this computer so I don't get on there. It's made my life much more productive. My phone, however, is the portal to that Pandora's box. Issues and pull requests, be really quick to close them, otherwise people get incredibly antsy. We got into a legal dispute with someone that wanted to withdraw their code because we took like a week to merge it, and it was really complicated. Luckily, that person was a military lawyer, so I wasn't too concerned about it, but it was bizarre. I can tell you about that over a pint. Dealing with strong personalities is one of the hardest parts. People think I have a strong personality, especially when I'm being a keyboard warrior, but usually I'm trying to make things better. And you can often get a strong personality who wants to contribute to your project, but the problem is they're an asshole. Dealing with that is really hard because you either kick them out or you try and deal with them, and there are many ways of doing that. But remember, you're the person who's responsible for determining what goes into your package. Just because someone's shouting at you doesn't mean you have to accept their code. Don't be pushed around, and gotta be realistic with it. If you like their code but don't like their personality, you kind of have to make a call on that. We've had problems in the League where people were giving us amazing code, but they're being really rude and looking down their nose and being patronizing and sarcastic to some of our more fresh contributors. And that was a real problem. I'd much rather have slightly worse code or like have to write that feature myself than have someone bullying people in my community, right? Listen to those actually using it. There's often problems with some people who write frameworks that are quite popular currently, and they do it the way they want, then when someone who uses it regularly gives, yeah, you know who I'm talking about. When people who actually use it give them feedback, they're like, no, I was right. I was right in the first place. You're wrong. You're doing it wrong. But these are people that actually use it. It's ridiculous. So people that use it are probably using it in a slightly different way to you are, and they can give you feature ideas and suggestions, and you should listen to them. Many of the features for plates, one of our more popular packages, came from pull requests and GitHub issues. So other people will suggest things you never thought of, and that's why it's helpful. Backwards compatibility is really hard to deal with. You will get shouted at either way. Once again, it's one of the wonderful things I've learned in my 10 years of dealing with open source, is that if you change too much, people will freak out at you for making them change their code. If you change too little, they'll complain at you because you're not doing enough to keep up with the fun new features in PHP, or you're not adding enough things and they're not excited by it anymore. And if you go down the middle, they'll both shout at you for the same reasons. So you get shouted at either way. One of the problems with Kohana, right, they changed everything. They just rewrote the framework overnight. And then they actively had 2 and 3 as completely separate communities because it was such a big change, no one could jump. Same with Python 2 and 3. This is something about 2 and 3. But try and change at a reasonable pace. If you've got a great idea for some breaking changes, but you've done a lot of other breaking changes, maybe wait a few months and then introduce it. Make a roadmap. Say, that's great, we'll get version 4 done. That can go in version 5 or 6 down the road, right? Oh, and you can always maintain 2 versions of your project. So if you want to jump to using PHP 5.5 and rewrite everything to use generators because you can't be blocking, bro, you can do that, but maintain the old version as well. So if someone notices a bug or has a speed improvement, you can merge that and then update it into your other version. So you have 2 major versions. It's a bit of an ask, but it helps. And the last thing is what to do when you lose interest. When you want to, I guess, go traveling is the point of that icon. I don't know. Or when you get homeless, I think was actually about. That's actually what happened to me. It's like, I've been kicked out of this country and I'm randomly in Turkey for a while, I guess. So can someone else do my work for me? It's actually one of the main benefits of the PHP League. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start it was that me and Alex and Ben, we were always pull requesting each other's code, but then one of us would go on holiday and the code wouldn't get merged and there'd be these new features and they just wouldn't get done. So by having loads of other people around that are interested in the project, you get a good way of you can kind of take over. Even if it is just under your own personal namespace and it's just your library and there's only 5 people have ever used it and you're not using it anymore because you've changed jobs or because you don't use PHP or whatever the reason, look at the highest contributors on there and then give it to them. Ask them if they want it, transfer it to them. I've transferred away more GitHub repos than I think a lot of people have ever had. And it's a really good feeling because you can either let it languish and let it die and let people get hacked because you're not maintaining security, or you can find someone who actively uses it and then give them that repo and they can maintain it and the users are happy and everyone cuddles or something, I don't know. But if you just let stuff die, then you're being a really irresponsible developer. And on that note, thank you very much. I don't know if we have time before raffle for questions. Yeah? Cool. You, sir.
I've been using the PHP League for a while, whatever, but there's a lot of also, because right now I'm working on marketing with the PHP framework, and we have a lot of stuff that works with the PHP League. But certain packages have Laravel keywords, for example, even though there's PHP plugins, bridges basically, to the
Yeah.
PHP League. So how hard will it be for us to like Walter has, for example, for OAuth server, we have for common mark and all this, but I always felt that the PHP League people are not elitist, but they're more Laravel people, and
Right.
they make other ways and whatever, and this is what kind of pushes us away from using the PHP League at certain times, because they're not going to actually encourage us to do more bridges, to use the packages, then why not reinvent the wheel, and be at least responsible of maintaining it, and merge pull requests even faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the question was kind of how in bed is the League with the Laravel, and I guess kind of linking up bridge packages and stuff. Absolutely. The reason we no longer usually put Laravel or any other framework specific code in there. The packages always work by themselves, completely by themselves. They never require a framework, but we have made exceptions for Laravel and Silex in the past because they have like a one-class service provider, right? So because Silex and Laravel just have this one class that you put in there, it's just in the source folder, Laravel, whatever, it's really, really easy to integrate them, and we just kind of shove that in there. And then other people have to use bridge packages. The trouble we go down there is either, once you let one in, everyone wants to be in. So then we get like Zen bundles and everything else in there. So what we're trying to do now is take them all out and recommend that people use bridge packages. And then you contact us and we link it in the README. So something I've added to... yeah. Oh. That sounds terrible. I'll talk to them about that.
And the keywords, for example, on the factory muffin, the keywords for packages, it's testing factory Laravel.
Oh, okay.
So I don't see how framework agnostic is becoming.
Yeah. That's it.
Some Laravel advertising.
That's interesting. The idea is that we are generally very agnostic. Each package is maintained by their own separate people. So I'm not like the head of it, but that definitely shouldn't be the case. It's definitely not leaning towards Laravel. It's like the entire point is to be agnostic, and anywhere I find Laravel being kind of featured more than anything else, I'll talk to them about that. If you absolutely, please do send pull requests. The way we try and do it in the README, in the README, I've started adding integrations sections, like in the next to contributors and stuff, and it will say, here's how you make, here's a Zen bundle, here's a Cake bundle, here's a Laravel bundle, and that's the way it should work.
Because so far we have about 10 plugins that work with some of like
Wow.
stuff. So Walter has some, I have some, I know other people have some, and we'd love to have like at least to tell the people from the PHP community that if you're using CakePHP, you can use this PHP League package, and here's the bridge.
For sure. Yeah, I want to do that as well, so find me after. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
What's your recommendation for, like, I've got a plugin package, whatever, I release it, but then I no longer am using it, I'm tired of it, I don't want to use it, I want to stop. I don't want to maintain it anymore, right? So what's your recommendation where I don't necessarily have someone to hand it off to?
Want to drop the mic? Yeah, it's really hard to do that. When I have more time, I go through a few steps on that slide. The process I go through is step 1, ask my friend. If I know there's someone specific, then I go to them. Step 2, look at your contributors and look at the, like I said, look at the highest ones up. If none of those want it, broadcast on Twitter. Just say like, hey, I'm trying to find someone to take over this code. Is anyone interested? Please retweet. That stuff does go quite a long way because there's usually someone out there that is interested. If you really, really cannot find anyone, if no one cares, sorry about that. But it happens, right? There are packages that just no one cares about. It's a niche and no one cares. So in that case, there's a feature on Packagist, which is quite new, and you can click Force Abandon. You can mark it as abandoned, and there's you can mark it just as abandoned, and it will tell people using that package, yo, you should probably get off this. If you can find a replacement, so look at your nearest competitor. So with a lot of the Markdown packages, they're actually deprecating, they're abandoning themselves and pointing towards one by Michael Mihej, whatever his name is, or they're pointing to League Common Mark. So look for the nearest competitor or the nearest close-ish thing, and then just say, this is abandoned, go and use that. Sure, you've got to rewrite your stuff, but you have a more active, package now. So, anyone else? Bye.